At the morning hearing, sunlight streamed through the glass walls of the conference room, casting bright lines across the plans I was presenting. Everything was still perfect until the phone on the table began to vibrate softly. A message appeared, just a few lines long, but enough to make the world around me collapse. Mariah, Julian isn't in London like he said. He's in Aspen, with a pregnant woman, and his parents are there too. I read it over and over, feeling as though someone was tightening a fist around my chest. The taste of my morning coffee turned bitter in my throat. Without saying a word, I set my pen down and walked out of the meeting room. 30 minutes later, I stood at the private airport watching Julian, the man who once vowed to spend his life with me, place his hand on another woman's stomach and smile with his family beside him. I don't remember how long I drove from the airport back home. The streets of Manhattan were as noisy as ever. But inside the car, my world had gone completely silent. Every light, every horn, every moving shadow blurred behind the glass. I could only hear the sound of my heartbeat steady, hollow, like the ticking of a clock counting down to another life about to begin. When the car stopped in front of the mansion in Greenwich Village, I didn't step out right away. The house stood in the dusk like an old photograph, still, perfect, and false. The glass windows reflected the last light of day, giving the facade a warm glow. But I knew that inside, it held only the chill of a dead illusion. I opened the car door. The March wind brushed against my coat, making the fabric tremble. The lilac scent from the front garden was as strong as ever, the one Julian always said he loved. "This scent makes the house feel like it's in love," he used to tell me. Now, each breath filled with that sweetness twisted my stomach tighter. Crossing the threshold, the only sound was the click of my heels against the marble floor. Everything in the house was neatly arranged: the wedding photo on the table, the pair of mugs he bought in Florence, the silk scarf he gave me for my 30th birthday. Everything was still in place, except now they were no longer memories but evidence, proof of a carefully crafted lie. I didn't cry. I didn't scream or break things like in the movies. This pain wasn't loud. It was quiet. Cold as metal, sharp as a blade. I went straight upstairs, to my father Thomas West's study, a room I had rarely opened since the day he passed. Inside, dim light reflected off a large black safe in the corner. Every time I touched its handle, I could feel the chill of the metal, as if my father were still there, guarding everything he built. The code hadn't changed: my birthday. When the door swung open, I saw neatly sealed envelopes, files perfectly arranged. On top lay his will. The paper had yellowed at the edges, but his handwriting remained firm and clear, as strong as the man himself. "Maria, never hand the key to your life to someone else." I read the sentence over and over, until the letters blurred behind tears I didn't realize were falling. Had he known something? Or was it simply the instinctive warning of a seasoned father? Whatever it was, his words stirred something deeper than pain, clarity. I folded the paper, put it back where it belonged, and opened the bottom drawer. Inside were the company shares, transfer papers, and executive contracts, everything my father had fought to protect. Julian had been granted only a small authorization, just enough to hold the title of vice president. Nothing more. I remembered the night my father died. Julian held my hand and said hoarsely, "I'll help you carry this legacy. I promise I'll always be by your side." Now, that promise echoed in my mind like a cruel joke. I sat down in my father's old leather chair. The desk lamp cast a small pool of light over the documents spread before me. I looked up at the framed photo of him by the window, a man with steady eyes and a gentle smile behind thin glasses. "Dad," I whispered, my voice catching in my throat. "If they've written a play, I'll be the one directing its ending." My hands trembled slightly, but inside, fear had already been replaced by something else, something I'd never felt so clearly before. Cold determination. I took out my phone and dialed Victor Harlan. Victor had built Aurora Group with my father from the ground up. He knew every secret of the company, and he was the only person I trusted now. The line rang several times before his familiar, gravelly voice answered. "Mariah, it's rare for you to call at night. What's wrong?" I kept my voice steady. "Victor, I need you to open an internal investigation. I suspect Julian's been withdrawing money from the Aurora Foundation Fund. And prepare the divorce papers." Silence lingered for a few seconds. I heard his heavy breathing. Are you sure? It could be a misunderstanding. It's not, I've seen enough. Victor didn't press further. His tone turned serious. All right, I'll come to the office tomorrow, but Mariah, don't act rashly, we'll need proof, and you'll need to stay strong. I'm stronger than you think, Victor. When the call ended, I stayed there in the dim light, listening to the steady tick of the wall clock. This house was no longer a home, it was a battlefield. And I knew I was about to enter the biggest war of my life. I stood and walked down the hallway. Every painting, every piece of furniture recalled memories that now only froze my heart further. On the table near the staircase was our wedding photo, me in a white gown, Julian in a black tuxedo, both smiling under strings of glowing lights. I picked up the frame and stared into his eyes, in the picture eyes that had once seemed genuine. You played your role well, Julian, I murmured, setting the frame face down on the table. The sharp clink of glass against wood echoed through the still house. I walked toward the kitchen. Inside, the fridge was the dinner. He'd said he'd warm up after returning from London. I took it out, opened it, and dumped it straight into the trash. Everything would be cleaned. The house. And his name from my life. That night, I barely slept. I logged into Aurora Group's internal system, lines of numbers and reports filled the screen, and patterns began to emerge: suspicious grants for overseas projects, signed by Julian, approved under the label of support for young designers. I downloaded all the data onto an external drive, encrypted it, and locked it in the safe. Some might call it an impulsive reaction from a betrayed wife. But I knew better. This wasn't personal anymore. It was a war for my father's honor, and for Aurora Group itself. By dawn, the sky outside the window had turned pale gray blue. My hands were freezing. I brewed a cup of ginger tea and stepped out onto the balcony. The city was slowly waking, one by one. The streetlights went out. I looked down at the quiet street below, the same one Julian and I used to walk together on autumn nights. Back then, he would talk about our dreams. Opening a branch in Milan, building a design academy for underprivileged students. I had believed in those dreams completely. And because I believed, I gave him everything. Now, in the faint morning light, I understood something. People can take everything from you, your reputation, your money, and your trust, but they only truly win if you let your heart decay. The next morning, my phone rang. On the screen appeared the name I'd been waiting for. Victor Harlan. His voice was deep, measured as always. Mariah, I've spoken to someone. His name is Caleb Dorn, former financial investigator, now a private detective. He's got the skills to trace every dollar's path. Do you want to meet him? I tightened my grip around the porcelain cup and took a deep breath. Set it up, Victor. As soon as possible. 3 hours later, I was sitting in a small cafe in Soho, in a quiet corner facing the street. The space was warm, the faint sound of jazz blending with the scent of freshly baked pastries. A man walked in, tall, slightly lean, gray coat. Eyes bright yet reserved. He introduced himself in a low, raspy voice. I'm Caleb Dorn. I'll keep this brief. Who do you want me to follow first? Julian Cross. I met his gaze, my voice steady, almost unnaturally calm. I need to know what he's done with the Aurora Foundation funds and with the company's money, especially the transactions linked to a name, Blueven LLC. Caleb jotted a few notes, his eyes narrowing slightly. Blueven LLC. I've heard that name. A shell company. Registered in Delaware. No one knows who the real owner is, but if the money went through it, there'll be a trail. He looked up, his tone calm but firm. Give me 3 days. Those 3 days felt longer than an entire season. I barely left the office. My coworkers still looked at me with the usual respect, unaware that every minute I was quietly gathering evidence against the man they still called Mr. Julian. I began backing up Aurora Group's entire server system. Every file, every email, every transaction record was copied to an external drive and encrypted with the personal security protocol I had helped design. When the screen finally displayed the words, "Backup complete," it felt like I had just tightened another knot around the man who had betrayed me. That night, After the last employee left the building, I stayed alone in my glass office on the 27th floor. The city below shimmered like a sea of light. I looked down at the hundreds of glowing windows inside those homes where people who probably still believed love was the safest place on earth. I once thought so too. A message came in from Victor. "Caleb has news. Meet me at the office tomorrow morning." Victor's office was in an old red brick building near Central Park. When I arrived, he was standing by the window, holding a thick folder. Caleb was beside him, looking as composed as he had on the first day. Victor pushed the folder toward me. "We have our answer." I flipped through the pages: receipts, bank transfers, scholarship contracts signed by Julian. In total, over $5 million in 3 years, funneled through Bluevin, LLC. The recipient, Lena Hart. I stared at the name, feeling the air leave my lungs. Lena. I vaguely remembered her being mentioned in a foundation meeting once, a promising student, who'd received funding for a sustainable fashion project. Julian had been the one to approve it. Caleb spoke softly. "She's living in Denver now. A mansion under Lena Hart's name, but the buyer who paid for it was Julian Cross. The Blue Vine account used company money to make the payments." Victor tapped the edge of the table. He also found that Julian moved all the foundation's insurance contracts to a different brokerage company under the name of someone connected to Lena. "They're using your father's trust to drain the company from within." Each sheet of paper felt like a blade cutting through my past, through the image of the man who once held me as I slept, who gripped my hand at my father's funeral, who swore to protect Aurora as he'd protect me. Caleb closed his notebook. "What do you want me to do next?" I looked up. My voice carried a calmness I didn't recognize in myself. "Keep tracking them. I need solid proof: photos, transactions, anything that can prove Julian's been exploiting the foundation." "Understood," Caleb said, his gaze steady. "You'll have it soon." That afternoon, I returned to Aurora's headquarters. I smiled at the receptionist like I always did. No one knew I had just come from a meeting where my husband's mask had been torn away. In my private office, I turned on my computer and accessed Julian's email system using the admin rights he didn't know I still had. Hundreds of outgoing messages filled the screen. I skimmed through the routine business exchanges until one subject line froze me. Flight to Miami confirmed. Don't forget the prenatal files." I opened it. The message was short. With an attachment, a copy of an ultrasound report, the due date, and a final line: "Our new life begins soon." New life. He'd already started his new life while I was still fighting to protect my father's legacy for both of us. I closed all the windows, then opened my encrypted drive. Files appeared in neat, cold rows. Emails. 2019-2022. Zip. Transfers. Blue Vine. PDF. Photos. Denver. JPG. That night, I met Victor again over a video call. "Mariah, you're moving too fast. I understand you want to protect Aurora, but you need to be careful. Julian isn't someone easy to deal with." "He used to be the man I loved," I said. "And that's exactly why I know Julian's only easy to deal with when he thinks he's in control." Victor sighed. "If you need extra help, Caleb can work long-term." "I trust him." "Good," I replied. "I need someone to shadow Lena Hart. I want every detail when they meet. Where, what they say. Everything." He nodded, his expression softening. "Mariah, your father would be proud of you. Just don't let vengeance consume what's left of you." Maybe he was right, but some things, if left undone, would leave nothing of me to save. 2 weeks later, Caleb sent over a heavy file. Inside were dozens of telephoto pictures, Julian and Lena stepping out of a Denver mansion, hand in hand, gazing at each other like newlyweds. In another shot, he was helping her up the stairs, his hand resting gently on her belly, an affectionate gesture that pierced like glass. In the last photo, the entire Cross family appeared. My mother-in-law, the same woman who'd once held me at my father's funeral, was adjusting Lena's scarf, her face warm and proud. I stared at that photo for a long time, until my vision blurred, not from tears but from a clarity so sharp it hurt. In that frame, they were a family. and I was nothing but a shadow standing outside it. I turned off the screen, folded my arms, and looked into the void ahead. No need for noise, no need for warning. I already knew what I had to do. The pain came suddenly, like a thin, cold blade. I was standing in the conference room, my voice steady over the projector. When the world tilted, my breath shortened, my vision narrowed like through a tunnel. I heard someone calling my name from far away, then everything faded into white silence. When I opened my eyes, the hospital's ceiling glowed softly above me, the faint scent of antiseptic in the air. A woman stood beside the bed, tall, wearing a white coat, her eyes calm. She introduced herself in a gentle but firm tone. "I'm Dr. Eleanor Mills. You fainted from a minor stomach hemorrhage. We've run all the necessary tests. And I'd like to speak with you privately." I looked around. The room was empty except for the two of us. Eleanor sat down beside the bed, placed a file on her lap, tapped her fingers lightly on it, then stopped. "Mariah, the biopsy results show you have a tumor in your stomach, early stage. The good news is we caught it early, and it's fully operable, but you need to rest as soon as possible." I listened to every word without blinking. In my head, the word stomach echoed like a call from the past. My father had lain on a similar bed, hearing the same diagnosis. "He never stood up again," Eleanor continued, her voice softening. "Prolonged stress, skipping meals, constant coffee, these all make it worse. I know you're running a major corporation, but the human body isn't made of metal." I smiled, my voice hoarse. "I'm not made of metal, but I have things to do. I need 2 weeks, Dr. Mills. After that, cut whatever you need to cut." She looked at me for a long time, her eyes holding a mix of sympathy and helplessness. 2 weeks. Fine, but you have to promise to eat properly and come back on time. I nodded, revealing nothing. Inside, those 2 weeks weren't for recovery, they were the deadline to end the war I had started. The next day, I returned to the office, trying to keep everything as normal as possible. Light reflecting off the glass wall stung my eyes. Every time I bent to sign a document, my stomach tightened, a silent reminder that time was running out. My assistant, Megan, noticed my face go pale and hurried over. "Are you okay, Mariah? Should I call the driver to take you home to rest?" I smiled and waved her off. "I'm fine, Megan. Just a little sleep deprived." She was about to say more, but my look stopped her. Megan was smart. She knew when to step back. She left the room, closing the door behind her, and I was alone again with unfinished plans and the quiet ache beneath a silk blouse. I turned on my computer and reviewed the list of meetings Julian had signed off on in the past month. The more I looked, the more tangled it seemed, projects that didn't exist, side funds with no recipients. Each number was a puzzle piece in the portrait of his crimes. The pain surged again. I pressed a hand to my stomach and drew a deep breath. 1 inhale, 2. I had to stay calm. I couldn't collapse with the game unfinished. That evening, I met Victor and Caleb at a small restaurant by the Hudson River. They were already waiting in a private room, candlelight glinting off wine glasses and casting a subdued hush over the table. Victor spoke first. "We've received additional documents from the bank." Julian moved money through 3 layers of intermediaries, all legitimized by sham consulting contracts. Caleb tracked the 2 most recent transfers. Caleb set a folder on the table. "You need to see this." Inside were copies of the papers for a mansion purchase in Denver under Lena Hart's name, paid entirely with funds transferred from Bluevin LLC. The signing date matched the day I discovered he had lied about his London business trip. I set the papers down and looked out the window. The Hudson shimmered in the night, tour boats passing and leaving long, pale trails of light. Victor's voice sounded distant in my ear. "Mariah, if you want to file suit, we'll need a few more direct pieces of evidence. A recording, a video, something the court can't deny." "He won't slip," I replied quietly. "Julian always keeps control." Caleb leaned back, his voice low. "No one stays in control forever. You need to wait for the moment he lets his guard down." I looked at the glass of water in front of me. A faint mist clung to its rim, like fog between two worlds. On one side, what I used to believe, on the other, where I now stood. I don't have much time, I said. In 2 weeks I have to be in the hospital for surgery. Before I'm on that table, I want to be sure Julian can't touch Aurora again. Victor stared at me, surprised. Mariah? You're ill. I nodded slightly, early stage, but enough to make me understand I'm not rich enough in time to delay. We sat in silence for a while. The only sound the gentle lap of waves outside. The days that followed fell into a strange rhythm. By day I ran the company as if nothing had happened. By night I worked with Victor and Caleb, silently weaving each piece of evidence together. Every morning, when I faced the mirror, my face looked a shade paler. But my eyes were brighter. The initial fear was gone, replaced by a cold, unnerving calm. One evening, while reviewing files, Megan knocked and stepped in with a cup of ginger tea. You should drink something warm. You've been working all day. I took the cup. Thank you. Megan. She hesitated. Mariah. You seem exhausted. If something's wrong, you can tell me. I looked at her young, earnest face, and a small softness stirred in me. I'm okay. This will pass. She left. The scent of ginger lingering in the air. I took a sip, feeling the heat slide down my throat. A reminder that I was still alive, still fighting. On the desk, my computer pinged with a new message. I opened it, an email from Caleb. Confirmed. Lena Hart will fly to New York on Friday. Julian booked a room at the Langmore Hotel, Suite 802. It's likely a private meeting. I'll be there. My heartbeat quickened. For the first time in weeks, I saw a clear beam of light cutting through my fog. I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes, and tried to picture Julian's face when he realized everything he'd hidden was being stripped away. Part of me wanted to see it. Another part feared I wouldn't have the strength to face it, but fear was a luxury I couldn't afford. I only had 2 weeks left, and with each passing day, the illness in my body ticked like a clock, reminding me there was no time to slow down. 3 days later, as I stepped out of the clinic to collect additional test results, Eleanor stopped me in the hallway. She held a folder, her eyes stern yet gentle. Mariah, I reviewed your numbers. The disease hasn't spread, but you're pushing your body past its limit. If you keep working at this pace, I'm afraid 2 weeks won't be enough. I forced myself to stay calm. Dr. Mills, 2 weeks are never enough for anyone. But sometimes, people don't need more time, they just need the right purpose. Eleanor fell silent, her gaze a mix of admiration and concern. At least promise me you won't hurt yourself any further. I looked out the window, where the afternoon sunlight stretched across the street and people hurried through the fading light. Life went on, even when someone had just learned they might die sooner than expected. I'll try, I whispered. When Eleanor left, I stood in that white hallway for a long time, the shuffle of shoes, the squeak of gurney wheels, the distant announcements all blended into one faint hum, making me feel smaller than ever. But in that moment, I understood, life's worth doesn't lie in its length, but in knowing you're spending it doing what must be done. My phone screen lit up with an incoming video call from Julian. His name glowed in the stillness of the afternoon, sunlight slipping through the office window and casting long streaks across the wall. I straightened my back, took a deep breath and pressed accept. Julian's face appeared, softened by the warm yellow glow behind him, the kind of light that made anyone seem gentle. His voice was low, steady, each word carefully chosen, like he was speaking to a fragile, delicate woman. My love, you look exhausted. I know I shouldn't be calling right now, but this is important. Aurora has a huge opportunity if we don't act fast. We could lose everything. I kept my expression calm, my voice faint and shaky, as if drained. Speak slowly, Julian. I'm still recovering. But tell me, what is it? He tilted his head slightly, his smile perfectly timed just enough to seem reassuring. A restructuring project. An investment fund from Singapore wants to inject capital into Aurora. But they need your signature to approve the share adjustment contract. It's just procedure, nothing to worry about. If we sign today, I can close the deal. My eyes lingered on the corner of his mouth, the same smile that once made me believe he was the safest place in the world. Now, I could see only the chill of calculation behind it. I'll review it, I said softly. Send me a copy, please. Of course, he nodded quickly, his eyes gleaming with confidence, convinced I was still the gentle wife he once molded. Thank you, Mariah. I know you've always put Aurora first. So have you, Julian. When the call ended, I set the phone on the table and stared at it for several seconds, as if I could still hear his voice echoing in the empty room. Then I called Victor, my voice hoarse from restraint. He just sent over the contract. Take a look. Victor arrived 40 minutes later, calm as ever, the composure of a man seasoned by countless legal wars. He opened the documents Julian had sent, turned each page slowly without a word. The white light from the desk lamp glinted off his glasses as he stopped at Clause 7. This isn't a restructuring, he said quietly. It's a transfer. 25% of your shares would be reassigned to Julian Cross under the label of Strategic Investment Adjustment. Once you sign, he'll have veto power over every board decision. I leaned back in my chair. What I felt wasn't fear, but confirmation of what I had already known. Julian was no longer a partner, nor a companion. He was a predator, and in his eyes, I was the weakening prey. Can you replicate this format, Victor? Yes. But what are you planning? I want you to help me create a mirrored version. Same structure, same layout, only the content changes. Victor frowned, narrowing his eyes at me. What content? Julian Cross voluntarily transfers all shares and financial rights in Aurora to me to protect the company's assets and reputation in case of legal risks. The note beneath will make it look like routine wording. Victor was silent for a few seconds, then nodded slowly. I see. You're building a mirror. To make him sign his own reflection. He's been acting for 10 years, Victor. It's my turn to direct the finale. 2 days later, the mirrored contract was ready. Victor sent me 2 identical envelopes, each containing a different version of the same set of documents. He warned me. It all depends on how well you make Julian believe he's still in control. Don't rush, don't hide, let him think you're weak. I held the envelopes in my hands. It felt like holding 2 blades, one sharp, one sweet, and at the right moment, both would become one. The next day, Julian called again. He was in his Denver office, the glass wall behind him revealing snow-covered mountains. Sunlight flooded the room, framing him like a savior amid the storm. Did you get the contract? Yes, I'm sending the scanned copy with the partner's signature so you'll feel secure. All we need now is yours. His tone was tender, laced with fake weariness. I forced a faint, fragile smile. Do you really believe this is a good opportunity, Julian? Of course, everything I've done is for Aurora, for us. The word slipped from his lips like air, yet it landed heavy as stone. I pretended to hesitate. I'll sign. But I want to do it in person. I don't trust your assistant anymore. He paused, then quickly nodded. Fine. I'll fly to New York this weekend. We'll sign it together. Good. I'll be waiting. On the desk, the 2 envelopes lay side by side, one white, one pale cream. With a blue ink pen, I wrote a single word on the corner of the forged copy. Begin. Just one word. A secret signal for the contract he didn't yet know he was about to sign. That evening, I met Caleb in the parking lot behind an old hotel where no one would recognize us. He handed me a small hard drive. All Bluevine data is stored here. He won't be able to deny it. I took it and slipped it into my coat pocket. Thank you, Caleb. I just need to hold on for a few more days. He looked at me, concern flickering in his eyes. You're playing a dangerous game, Mariah. Julian isn't the type to surrender easily. I know, I said softly. But men like him only lose when they think they've already won. The night wind swept through, carrying the chill of the Hudson. I pulled my collar higher and looked up at the gray sky. In the cold air, I could hear my heartbeat slow, steady, no longer trembling. I had once loved Julian enough to lose myself. But now, that love had turned into the sharpest weapon I possessed. Understanding. I knew how he lied, how his eyes shifted when he hid something, how he ruled the world with gentle deceit. And I would use every bit of it to destroy him. 3 days later, Julian walked into my Manhattan office, looking composed like a man about to save an empire. He wrapped his arms around me, the familiar scent of his cologne lingering in the air, the same fragrance that once made me feel safe, now only stirred disgust. "You've lost weight," he said, his hand tightening gently on my shoulder. I was really worried. I leaned slightly away, forcing a faint smile. "Don't worry about me. Where's the contract?" Teltov 1. He took a stack of papers from his briefcase and handed it to me. "Here. You just need to sign at the bottom. I've arranged everything to go as smoothly as possible." I opened the envelope on my desk and, while he wasn't looking, slipped in the mirrored version Victor had prepared. Every line, every faded stamp looked identical. When he lowered his pen to sign, my hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but because, in that moment, 10 years of trust came to an end. Julian signed quickly, then looked up at me. "See. Now you can relax. We're going to lead Aurora into a new era." Yes, Julian. A new era. He didn't know that, at that very moment. The pen in his hand had signed his own sentence. The rumors began like a soft breeze, then, within 2 days, became a storm. On Monday morning, every financial newspaper carried the same bold headline across its front page: "Aurora Group on the brink of bankruptcy, heiress Mariah West forced to liquidate personal assets." I sat in my office, a cup of tea steaming before me. The scent of bergamot drifted through the air, blending with the frantic tapping of keyboards outside. Megan burst in, phone in hand, her face a mix of worry and confusion. "Ms. Mariah, the press is going wild. The PR team won't stop calling. They say an internal source leaked that Aurora's gone insolvent. They even posted photos of West Mansion on the front page." "I know. Let them talk." Her eyes widened. "But it's not true. Should I issue a statement?" "No need. The quieter we are, the louder the rumor gets. That's what they'll never understand." Megan hesitated, then nodded softly and left. I opened my laptop and reread the article. Beneath a photo of the West Mansion was the caption: "The 120-year-old Greenwich Village estate, once the symbol of the West family legacy, has been listed for sale at 30% below market value. Analysts predict Aurora Group is facing a severe liquidity crisis." That word had never frightened me. In this game, sometimes the only way to make your enemy step into the trap is to pretend you've already lost everything. That afternoon, the office phone rang nonstop. On the other end was Elaine Cross, Julian's mother, the same woman who had embraced me on my wedding day and said, "You're the greatest gift God has given this family." Her voice now was sharp with panic and rage. "Mariah, what is all this? You're selling the mansion. The papers say Aurora's going bankrupt. Have you thought about anyone but yourself? Do you have any idea what this is doing to the Cross family's reputation?" I closed my eyes, listening as if she were reading from a script. "I didn't intend for this to go public, Mother," I said, my voice trembling just enough to sound desperate. "But things have gotten out of control, Aurora. I might have to announce a restructuring." Her voice rose, chaotic like a storm. "Where's Julian? Does he know? I told him not to let you run the company alone. If Aurora collapses, this family loses everything. Julian's in Denver, working on the restructuring project. He doesn't need to worry. I'll find a way." "No. He needs to come back immediately." Her voice hissed through clenched teeth. "I'm calling him right now, Mariah. Don't do anything else. I mean it. If you ruin Aurora, don't expect to ever set foot in this house again." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, its red light blinking like a heartbeat, each flash marking one more step in my plan. Moments later, a message from Caleb appeared on my screen. "Elaine just called Julian. He's booking the earliest flight back to New York. You did it." I set the phone down and leaned back, closing my eyes. The pain in my stomach flared, sharp and steady. I pressed a hand over it and smiled faintly. So he's coming back, I whispered. And when he signs, it'll all be over. 2 days later, I arrived at Westchester Airport. The driver opened the door, but I motioned for him to wait. In the mirror, I studied my reflection: low-tied hair, pale face without makeup, a loose gray coat that hid the weight I'd lost. I looked exactly how Julian needed to see me, weak enough for him to believe he'd already won. The flight from Denver landed. The crowd spilled from the gate. And there he was in a black suit, walking with confidence, the same half-smile that once convinced me the world belonged to him. Julian spotted me first. He hurried over and opened his arms. "Mariah, God. You've lost so much weight. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I nearly lost my mind reading the news. "What's happening?" I stepped back half a pace, a faint smile curving my lips. "You care." He frowned, resting a hand gently on my shoulder, his voice thick with concern. "Of course I care. I can't let you go through this alone. You've been overworking, the media's on your back, but I'm here now. Everything's going to be fine." "Fine." I repeated the word in my head. It sounded like a cruel joke. I turned away, my voice trembling softly. "Let's go. I'm tired." All the way home, Julian talked non-stop about solutions, about investors he'd contact, about the faith he still had in me. I listened without interrupting, only nodding occasionally. The more he spoke, the more confident he became. And the more confident he was, the less he saw the walls quietly closing in around him. When the car turned through the gates of West Mansion, the rain hadn't stopped. The old trees shuddered in the wind, leaves falling hard onto the wet ground. The white mansion stood tall and silent, a witness to a tragedy nearing its final act. Julian glanced around, his expression uneasy. "I thought you were selling it." "Couldn't find a buyer," I said softly. "No one wants to buy a house on the verge of foreclosure." He sighed, lowering his voice with a note of pity. "Don't say that. I brought the restructuring contract. If you sign it, I can raise the capital to save Aurora. We still have a chance, Mariah." I stood still, eyes on the rain, my voice as quiet as a breeze. "Do you have the contract? Let me see it." Julian quickly opened his briefcase and took out the folder. "Here. You just need to sign at the end. I'll handle the rest. Trust me, this is for our future." I looked at his face and saw that mix of excitement and pride, the familiar expression of a man convinced everything was under his control. I took the folder and walked toward the large wooden table in the living room, where the chandelier's warm glow reflected off the papers. "Would you like something to drink?" I asked, uncapping my pen. "A glass of scotch, if you still have some." "In the same old cabinet," as Julian turned away. I quietly swapped the folder in my hands with the one Victor had prepared. The two contracts were identical down to every line and faint seal except for one thing. In this version, Julian Cross voluntarily transferred all Aurora shares to me, to ensure financial obligations and protect the company's image. He turned back, the amber liquid swirling in his glass. "Have you reviewed everything?" I asked softly, my tone weak, showing just enough hesitation to please him. "Of course, you just need to sign." "Don't worry." I let a thin smile show, setting the pen on the table. "No, Julian. Today. I want you to sign first." He raised his brows, surprised. "Me? Why would?" "I want to trust you." I interrupted, my voice light, almost like a confession. "You said this is for our future. Let me see that." Life. A flicker of doubt crossed his face before vanishing. Confidence, the very thing that made him successful, and the very thing that would destroy him. Julian smiled and signed with a quick, firm stroke. "There. You see, I'd never leave you alone." I slid the papers toward me, my fingertips brushing the still wet ink. "I know. Thank you, Julian." Outside, distant thunder rolled in the distance, blending with the heavy rain pounding the old roof. The mansion seemed to hold its breath. He didn't realize that in that very moment, the contract he had just signed had transferred everything: power, wealth, and the only protection he had left into my hands. I closed the folder and looked up at him. Would you like to have dinner here? Julian smiled, unaware the real storm had just begun. Of course, I'm home. I turned away, hiding my smile in the dim light of the kitchen, where the scent of damp wood and rain mingled the scent of victory taking shape. Julian sat across from me, posture confident as ever, like a man who believed he still controlled everything. I placed a thick folder on the oak table. The paper was slightly damp from the mist near the window, the fresh ink smell mingling with the scent of aged wood. This is the emergency loan agreement, I said, my voice tired but steady. If you sign it, we can save Aurora. The banks will trust us more if they see we're united. Julian tilted his head, glancing at the pile of documents, his eyes gleaming with curiosity and pride. He pulled out one page, skimmed the top lines, and gave a quiet laugh. You always need me, he said gently, with a trace of mockery. I stayed still, hands folded over my knees. Under the light, my wedding ring glimmered faintly, a thin trace of something long dead, still clinging to the shape of love. I don't deny it, I murmured. Aurora is my father's legacy. But Julian, you were the one who helped it grow. Without you, it might have fallen apart long ago. I know. My words were just true enough for him to believe and just false enough to hide my intent. Julian smiled, that self-satisfied smile, the one that had earned him the title, the man who seduced with intelligence. He leaned back, arms crossed, his tone filled with confidence. I told you, Mariah, I always know how to save what's ours. I'll sign, because I trust you. I tilted my head and smiled faintly. You've always been the one I trust most, Julian. I took the pen from my coat pocket and laid it gently on the edge of the folder. That pen wasn't just a tool, it was the blade I had been sharpening for months. Julian opened the cap, holding it like a weapon he knew well. He flipped through the first few pages, densely packed financial jargon, charts, figures, footnotes arranged by Victor and me so nothing stood out. On page 17, one sentence sat neatly within clause 13. 4. Buried among dozens of technical lines, Party B, Julian, Cross, voluntarily transfers all shares and financial rights to Party A, Maria West, as compensation for management misconduct. A single sentence, precise, legal, wrapped in professional language only a lawyer or a truly alert mind would notice. But Julian didn't read carefully. He only saw what he wanted to see. He skimmed past it, his smile widening. I still remember when we first got married, you were afraid of losing the company. And I helped you restructure it. Seems history repeats itself. I lowered my eyes, hiding the storm building behind them. Maybe it does. He signed the first page, then the middle. I watched his hand move, steady and confident. One signature. 2, then 3. Julian looked up, smiling, and handed me the pen. Your turn. We're a team again. I signed beside his name, the final ritual of someone burying the last remnants of the past. It's done. He exhaled, relieved, smiling with satisfaction. I knew it. Nothing can divide us. No matter what the press says, we're still on the same side. I looked at him, silent. Outside, thunder rolled again. A flash of lightning split the sky, spilling white light across the window and over Julian's face, turning his smile into something carved from ice. Inside me, a strange feeling rose, not joy, not triumph, but a quiet sadness mixed with release. Maybe because I knew it was truly over. He picked up his glass of scotch and drank it down. I'll call the partners, tell them the deal's signed. Aurora will have funds by the end of the week. I nodded. Good. You should rest a bit. You look tired. Julian smiled, setting his glass on the table, his hand brushing the folder, unaware it had just become his own, the papers that ended his control. When he left the room, I stayed, eyes fixed on the stack of papers. Each line, each number seemed to shimmer under the light. I pulled out the final page with his signature and stared at it for a long time, the bold, confident handwriting, so perfectly him. And it was that confidence that had destroyed him. Victor called. He signed. I said quietly. I know. Victor replied, his voice low. I just received the scanned copy from the notary office. Within 24 hours of notarization, Victor filed the petition. By 9 a.m., the warrant was executed. Everything's valid. I folded the file, placed it into a leather envelope, and locked it in the steel drawer beneath my desk. Prepare the next step, I said. Slowly. Mariah. Victor paused. Are you all right? I looked around the wide room once filled with laughter, now echoing only the sound of rain. I'm fine. Just a little tired. Julian returned that night, holding 2 glasses of red wine. He looked relaxed, even happy. I just got off the phone with my mother. She's relieved you agreed to sign. I told her we're back to how we used to be. I took the glass and sipped. The bitter taste spread across my tongue, sharp and dark like the ache rising in my throat. Back to how we used to be? I asked softly, barely more than a breath. Yes, like when we still believed in each other. Julian smiled, his eyes warm with nostalgia. I know you doubted me at times, but everything I did was for Aurora. For you. I set the glass down and looked straight at him. In that case, thank you, Julian, he smiled, believing the gratitude was real. Tomorrow I'll fly back to Denver. They're waiting for the contract. In a week, everything will be fine. Yeah, I replied quietly. 1 week. He leaned down and kissed my forehead. I didn't move. Didn't resist. I just watched him walk away. The sound of his leather shoes echoed across the wooden floor. Steady and confident, the steps of a man who believed he had just won. The door closed. In the empty room, I stood still, my hand resting on the folder. A drop of water from the leaking ceiling hit the floor, a faint sound that vanished just as quickly. I closed my eyes and whispered, not to him but to myself. Goodbye, Julian. The light glowed softly over my father's portrait on the wall. His gaze seemed to ease, not a reminder anymore, but a silent nod of approval. That morning, the hospital corridor was blindingly white. I lay on the gurney as its wheels squeaked over the tiles. Each sound a slow, rhythmic count toward the point of no return. The faint smell of antiseptic lingered in the air, cold, clean, emotionless. With every passing second, I could hear my heartbeat mix with the steady footsteps of the nurse beside me. Megan walked alongside, her face paler than usual. She gripped her phone tightly, her anxious eyes trying to mask fear so I wouldn't worry. I turned my head and gave her a faint smile. Megan, I said hoarsely. If something happens, you know what to do, right? She swallowed hard, bending closer, her voice trembling. Ms. Maria. Please don't say that. Everything will be fine. You just need to stay positive. I looked at her, the light reflected in those loyal, youthful eyes made my chest tighten. Megan wasn't just an assistant. She'd been the only one by my side since my father's death. The witness to every fall, every secret. I took her hand and said slowly, send a message to Victor. Just one word, commence. She looked at me for a few seconds, then nodded in understanding. Yes, I understand. The nurse stopped the gurney in front of the operating room. The red light above the door blinked steadily. I looked around, white walls, bright lights, the cold gleam of metal instruments. Everything looked exactly like the room where my father once lay, on a morning just as calm as this. Before everything fell apart, I closed my eyes and felt the mask brush my skin. Dr. Eleanor Mills appeared, her eyes calm, her voice soft as running water. Ready, Mariah. The sooner, the better, doctor. She smiled gently. You're stronger than your father ever was. I know you'll make it through. I didn't answer. As the needle pierced my arm, a chill spread through my veins, sharp and quick, climbing toward my chest. Her voice drifted farther away, echoing like through fog. Start counting from 10, Mariah. 10, 9, 8. Before the world slipped from my grasp, I whispered one last thought almost silently in my mind. Now, begin, Victor. Across the city, Victor Harlan sat in his law office as the clock struck 9 a.m. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting a glow across a thick folder labeled Aurora Group, Investigation. He glanced at his phone just as a message appeared. Megan. Commence. Victor didn't hesitate. He pressed a button on his desk phone. Caleb, it's time. Across from Aurora Group headquarters, Caleb Dorn sat in a black SUV. At the signal, he nodded, adjusted the mic on his lapel, and spoke into the radio. Team A, move in. The warrant's been signed. Within minutes. Officers from the Financial Crimes Division entered Aurora's main lobby. The receptionist barely had time to react before a court order, stamped with the seal of the state of New York, landed on the desk. We have a warrant to seize all financial records linked to Vice President Julian Cross. Please cooperate. On the 27th floor, Julian was in a board meeting, his tone authoritative. We have to act before the market closes. Aurora can't afford to lose more shareholder confidence. But the conference room doors burst open. 2 agents stepped in, their voices firm. Mr. Julian Cross. Julian turned, frowning in irritation. What's going on? We're in the middle of a meeting. You're under arrest on suspicion of embezzlement, money laundering, and financial fraud. Please come with us. The room fell silent. Then came the murmurs. A director near the end of the table shot up. Oh my God. This must be a mistake. Julian tried to stay composed, but his face turned pale. This is absurd. I'm the vice president. Who's behind this? The officers stepped forward and cuffed him in front of the stunned board. Camera shutters clicked rapidly. The journalists Victor had arranged through Noah Green, investigative reporter for the Chronicle, captured every moment. At that very moment, the Chronicle's homepage updated with a breaking headline. Aurora Group Vice President embezzled charity funds to support Mistress. Evidence links to Denver Properties and Bluevin LLC. A photo of Julian in his expensive suit, handcuffed and wide-eyed, filled the page. Within hours, every news outlet and social platform exploded with the story. On the hospital TV, the headlines flashed non-stop. Megan sat in the hallway, clutching her phone, eyes glued to the screen. The newscaster's voice was calm, almost detached. According to exclusive information from the Chronicle, evidence provided by attorney Victor Harlan and former investigator Caleb Dorn led to the emergency arrest of Mr. Julian Cross, vice president of Aurora Group, on charges of embezzlement, fraud, and money laundering. Megan swallowed hard, then typed a message. Victor, the news is live. Next step. The reply came almost instantly. Everything's proceeding as planned. Stay with her. Don't let anyone in. Meanwhile, at Aurora, Victor stood in the crowded lobby, surrounded by flashing lights and shouting reporters. Mr. Harlan, what is the current status of Aurora Group? Victor kept his tone calm, deliberate. Aurora Group remains fully operational. Mr. Julian Cross has been suspended from all duties. The authorities are handling the matter according to the law. Another reporter shouted. Is it true that the information came directly from CEO Mariah West? Indcomser. Victor smiled faintly, neither confirming nor denying. I'll let the public find that answer themselves. He turned and walked away, leaving the media storm roaring behind him. Outside, Julian was led into a police car. The first rain of the season poured heavily. As if the sky itself wanted to wash his name off Aurora's shining walls, he shouted as the car door slammed shut. I'm being set up. I'll sue all of you, Mariah, do you hear me? You won't get away with this. His voice was swallowed by the rain. In the operating room, I could faintly hear Dr. Eleanor's distant voice through the haze of anesthesia. Pulse steady, preparing for tumor removal. But somewhere deep in what remained of my awareness, I heard another sound, the sound of thousands of doors unlocking, of the final chains breaking free. I couldn't see Julian, but I knew exactly where he was in that moment of chaos. Under the flashes of cameras and the glint of cold steel cuffs, the last image before I drifted into darkness was the blinding glow of the surgical lights reflecting off the doctor's face shield, identical to the camera flashes lighting Julian's face as the officers read him his rights. 2 worlds, one fighting for life, the other stripped of power, running in parallel, only a few blocks apart. And between them, the war I had started had finally reached its turning point. When the first scalpel touched my skin, everything I had held inside for years broke loose, like the storm pouring over Manhattan. And I, in that cold haze, whispered soundlessly. "Father. Aurora has been restored. I just have to make it through today." The courtroom that morning was packed. Harsh white light streamed through the tall windows, shining directly onto the dark wooden table where Julian sat like a shadow stripped bare under daylight. He looked gaunt, his cheeks sunken, the expensive suit hanging loosely on his frame. The eyes that once commanded respect in the world of finance were now dull hollows, belonging to a man slipping off the edge. I sat across the aisle, my hands clasped, eyes fixed on the judge. Before me was a thick stack of documents, divorce papers, financial evidence, investigation reports. Each page was a cold incision into the past, into the love I once believed was real. Julian didn't look at me until the judge finished reading the interim ruling. Based on the evidence presented, executive authority, and all company shares are hereby granted to Mrs. Mariah West. The defendant, Mr. Julian Cross, will remain in custody pending trial on charges of fraud and embezzlement. The words fell clearly, slowly, like the strike of a gavel sealing fate. For a split second, I saw Julian's shoulders tremble, and the calm, confident mask he had worn for years shattered completely. Reporters began snapping photos. The rapid clicking of cameras sounded like rain striking metal. I thought he would stay silent like most men who lose everything, still trying to preserve a shred of dignity. But he didn't. As the officers approached to cuff him, Julian suddenly shot up. His voice came out hoarse, half crazed, echoing through the stunned courtroom. "You think you've won, Mariah," he shouted, eyes wild, hair disheveled across his forehead. "You really think you're the victor? Your father died because of you. Ask the doctor if you don't believe me." The room froze. Then came a low murmur of disbelief. I couldn't hear anything else, just the pounding of my own heartbeat in my ears. "What did you say?" I gasped, my voice cracking in the air. Julian laughed, a twisted, chilling sound. "You didn't know, did you? You thought your father died from illness, but I know the truth, he didn't. Check the records, Mariah, if you dare." He screamed one last time before two officers dragged him away. His steps faltered across the marble floor, while I sat frozen in place. His words echoed endlessly in my head. "Your father died because of you." Victor, sitting beside me, placed a steady hand on my shoulder, his voice firm and low. "Don't listen to him. He's trying to pull you down with him." I nodded. But unease twisted inside me. Not because I believed Julian, but because a small part of me feared he was right. That afternoon, I sat alone in my father's old office, staring at his photo on the desk. It was taken the autumn before he passed, his gentle smile, weary eyes, still bright. I remembered that day vividly. He sat in his armchair, holding a cup of tea, while Julian stood behind him, speaking calmly with his private doctor. I could still smell the faint bitterness of herbal medicine, the one Julian said would help my father recover. I could still hear Julian's voice. "This is my own formula, all natural. It'll make him feel better than those chemical drugs." And I had believed him. Completely. Now, with everything collapsed, those words cut like a blade. I grabbed my phone and dialed Victor. "I need you to do something," I said. "Reopen my father's medical records. Every file, every transaction. Even any account Dr. Eleanor ever used. I need to know if anything was off. I'll start immediately." I sank into the chair, my hands trembling uncontrollably. Part of me prayed I was wrong, that Julian had lied just to hurt me. But deep down, a cold, persistent instinct told me otherwise. 3 days later, Victor walked into my office and placed a thick folder on my desk. His voice was rough. Mariah, you should brace yourself." He opened the file, pointing at a bank statement. 3 weeks before your father's death, Julian transferred $70,000 into Dr. Eleanor Mills's account. "Dr. Eleanor, that's impossible. She saved my life." The payment was labeled as medical research support, but no such study exists. After Mr. Thomas's death, his medical file was edited, the progress notes changed. The tumor was marked as rapid progression, even though prior test results showed it was stable. I pushed my chair back, my body suddenly weightless, disconnected from the floor. "You're saying?" Julian bribed her. "I'm afraid so, and there's more. Caleb found evidence that Julian personally brought your father's herbal recovery tonic every morning. We sent a sample for testing. The results confirmed it contained compounds that erode the stomach lining. The formula didn't just fail to help, it accelerated his decline. The air froze in my lungs. Each breath was shallow, painful. No, he couldn't have. My voice broke. Julian said he only wanted my father to recover, so he could focus on Aurora again. Yes, Victor said quietly. He wanted him healthy just long enough to legally transfer his shares. I clutched my head, a sob tearing out before I could stop it. Memories flooded back. Julian carrying tea into my father's room, reassuring me to rest, saying, "Let me take care of him for you." Every one of those moments was now proof of his betrayal. "Oh God," I whispered, tears hitting the wooden desk. "I slept beside my father's killer for 10 years. Victor stepped closer, resting a hand on my shoulder. Silent. There were no words that could console this. That night, I went back to the old house where my father had spent his final years. The room was untouched, as if he'd just stepped out yesterday. The armchair by the window, the mahogany shelves, the medicine bottles still lined neatly in the cabinet. I opened the drawer and took out a small brown glass bottle, the one Julian had always used. The label still read Herbal Recovery Formula. I unscrewed the cap and brought it to my nose. The bitter scent hit the back of my throat, the same taste that had filled my father's final months. I clenched the bottle in my hand, the metal cap bit into my palm. "I'm sorry, Father," I whispered. "I let him kill you without even knowing." I wasn't angry anymore. The pain wasn't fire, it was a hollow void. I understood now that justice wasn't just about seeing Julian behind bars. It was about revealing the truth so my father could finally rest, and Aurora would no longer bear the stain of a murderer's touch. I wiped my tears and called Victor. "Victor. I want to reopen my father's case. This time, not for Aurora, for him." The verdict was delivered on a gray winter morning. The courtroom was packed not because people still cared about Aurora Group, but because they wanted to witness the fall of Julian Cross, once the golden symbol of success in finance. I sat quietly in the back row. When the officer laid a hand on Julian's shoulder, he lifted his head, his gaze empty. Gone was the arrogance, the commanding posture of the man who had once ruled an empire. What remained was a frail figure, hair graying too soon, eyes hollow. The judge read the sentence slowly, each word striking like a hammer. "The defendant, Julian Cross, is hereby sentenced to 10 years in prison for financial fraud, embezzlement, and deliberate harm to another's health." Julian didn't resist. He only turned once to look at me, his expression faint, as though an endless gulf had opened between us. All hatred, all love, had dissolved inside me, leaving only the strange calm of someone finally free from the longest storm of her life. A month later, the headlines read, "Cross and Partners officially declares bankruptcy." The accompanying photo showed the family mansion sealed off, its white picket fence rotting, curtains drawn shut. The woman who once proudly called me the Cross family's daughter-in-law vanished from society. No one ever heard from Elaine Cross again. As for Lena Hart, the so-called innocent victim, she disappeared quietly from Denver. Caleb reported that she'd changed her name and moved to a small town in Southern California, teaching yoga and avoiding people. I didn't care anymore. Some wounds don't need my revenge. Time had done that for me. I recovered slowly, but surely. My body remained fragile after surgery, yet my mind had never been clearer. I cut my hair short, neat. I no longer tried to fit the image of the perfect CEO others expected. I just wanted to be myself, a woman who had survived. Aurora Group was taken over and completely restructured by Victor. I stepped down from my executive role and transferred most of my shares into a new nonprofit organization called the Phoenix Foundation, Fulung Hoang. I chose that name after a sleepless night, watching the flames in my fireplace and thinking, if there is any creature that knows how to rise from its ashes, it's the phoenix. The foundation was created to support women who had been deceived or financially manipulated after marriage, women like I once was, who had lost faith but still wanted to start over. I used my own experience to help them see that failure isn't the end of a story. The foundation's first gala was held at the Regency Hotel, in a marble-floored ballroom under glittering chandeliers, laughter, cello music. The soft clink of champagne glasses, everything looked glamorous. But it no longer dazzled me. I simply observed quietly, smiling at each woman who came to thank me. Every one of them carried a story, and in their eyes, I saw reflections of who I once was. That night, after the guests had gone, a middle-aged man approached me. He was tall, a bit lean, with graying hair and silver-rimmed glasses. His eyes were sharp yet kind. "I hope I'm not intruding, Ms. West," he said softly, his voice calm as wind. "My name is Dr. Adrian Monroe. I was once your father's student." I froze for a moment. My father? Yes, I worked with him in the herbal pharmacology research group at Stanford. He was the one who taught me that anything that heals can also become poison if placed in the wrong hands. His words sent a chill down my spine. "What do you mean by that?" Dr. Monroe reached into his jacket and took out a small envelope. "I read the reports about the Julian Cross case. A former colleague sent me a copy of the lab analysis tied to the herbal tea your husband used to prepare for your father." I re-examined it. I took the envelope, my hand trembling slightly. "And what did you find?" He removed his glasses and looked me straight in the eye. "The two herbs used in that so-called recovery tea, Helena root and fever blossom, are harmless on their own. But when combined, they form a toxin that erodes the stomach lining. The result is progressive tissue damage, internal bleeding, and chronic pain. The symptoms match perfectly with your father's condition. And," he paused, lowering his voice, "with yours as well." I gripped the envelope tightly. My heart seemed to stop. "You're saying my illness came from that tea too?" "Highly likely." He nodded. "The lesions in your stomach don't look spontaneous. They appear to be the result of long-term toxin exposure. I'm sorry to say this, but he didn't just kill your father. It's possible he intended to kill you as well." The faint music and chatter from the ballroom faded into a blur. I had to steady myself against the table to stay upright. "So, he didn't just kill my father. He nearly killed me too." He started to say something, but I lifted my hand to stop him. "Thank you. Honestly, I needed to hear that to finally understand everything." He nodded and quietly walked away, leaving me alone in the empty room. For 10 years, I had lived in deception, fought through pain, and now that the truth had surfaced completely, I felt no hatred, only relief. Justice never arrives when we expect it. But when it does, it brings light, not blinding, but soft and warm, shining over the scars that have finally closed. Outside, Caleb Dorn's car was waiting. He leaned casually against the door, arms folded, eyes lifted toward the building. His calm demeanor hid something quiet behind it, a kind of patience, perhaps protection, or maybe the beginning of another story. I kept my face still, then turned away toward the brightening morning. My footsteps echoed softly on the wooden floor, fading into the distant sound of music from the gala, a gentle farewell to an old chapter. Maybe, after all, the most frightening thing isn't betrayal itself, but losing the courage to trust again. Yet as I look back, I realize it was the wounds that taught me how to rise stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. If you've ever gone through something that broke your heart but still found light at the end, I want to hear your story. Share it in the comments below. And if this story touched you, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe so we can continue this journey together toward trust and peace.